Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of Table 21. I'm your host, Christopher Wells, the co-founder and CEO of Piecemeal. You haven't seen me or us in a while because I was very good at doing a frequent podcast for a while because I really love talking to people from my industry. But Piecemeal is doing so well that I haven't had as much time. But then I came across my guests today on LinkedIn and saw a lot of the stuff that they were doing. The book that they came out with. The book is called Delivering the Digital Restaurant, Your Roadmap to the Future of Food. So today we have both authors, Meredith Sandland and Carl Orsbourn. And I know I'm probably messing up his name because I was messing it up as I was writing it and he'll tell me. But basically, you get an idea that in the world we live in and in the restaurant industry that we are today, about ghost kitchens and pivoting concepts and delivery and all of the third-party apps and doing it on your own on your website, and everybody had to adapt. And obviously the last 2 years I accelerated that quite a bit. So I was like, I want to have these two on because I think it will be very beneficial to our audience. So without any further ado, Carl, Meredith, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending where you're watching this from. Yeah. Where are you both out? West Coast, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm in Montreal, Canada. It's getting cold up here.
Oh.
You California?
It's getting cold here too. It's like probably 60.
It's probably like 40, 30s here or something like that.
It's crazy how the Californians feel the 60-degree temperature is cold, Christopher. As an Englishman, I know that is. I tan in this weather. Let's put it that way.
Exactly right. I mean, you're used to a lot muggier and a lot weather. Anyways, a lot of rain, kind of like Vancouver gets on the West Coast on that. And before we dig in and talk about the book, because there's a lot to uncover here. I'm happy to do we're doing a longer form interview, so we'll have time to dig in. But I want to get to know you both. We'll talk about your background as we, get in the nitty gritty. But I like to play a little this or that, if you don't mind, with me. And I'll start with you, Meredith. Are you more an early riser or a night owl?
Well, I've become an early riser. I have been a night owl my entire life. But about 10 years ago, I married a man who was a water polo player and got up at 4 a.m. every day for his entire life. And he's converted me. I love the morning now.
Yeah, I'm getting there with kids, but I'm not there yet. I'm guessing the next few years, I'm the old bartender that's gonna do other stuff. But 4 a.m. is kind of the time I used to go to bed at, not the time I get up. But yeah, right. With the kids, it changes, right? How about you, Carl?
Yeah, I am the opposite. I do my best things when the sun sets, but in this day and age, because of the ways and workings of working with a co-author, I've had to adapt as much. I don't wake up at 4 a.m., but I'm frequenting a number of 7 a.m. calls here to not only satisfy Meredith's kind of needs, but also a lot of our East Coast colleagues that obviously are up and at it at that time.
Yeah, it worked well for writing the book, though, because Carl would write a draft at night and stay up while I was sleeping, and then I'd get up while he was sleeping and review it. So
that works, actually. That's a pretty good way of being efficient, for sure.
Yeah.
If it's time to work out, are you more jogging or gym?
I'm probably more gym, I'd say. Yeah. Although, to be honest, I prefer anything which is more of a exercise through gamification. So
I'm kind of sport, or
I'm a beach volleyball player. Every Saturday, I'm down on the beach enjoying that side of lifestyle.
Nice stuff. You, Meredith, you more jogging or gym?
I would say I am more sofa. Is that an answer?
No, it is a great, and you have a great sofa with a great painting behind you. So I mean, I can totally see sitting on there. Now, Meredith, knowing about your background, I have an idea of what your answer will be on the next one. But for both of you, are you more burger or tacos?
Well, obviously tacos. I don't even have to explain myself.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm probably more burger, I'd say. Although I like all forms of food apart from anything with blue cheese. So if you put a taco in front of me, I'm very happy. Although, to be honest, it took me a number of years to say the word taco correctly. I sometimes say taco and things like that. So, and people,
Well, I'm French Canadian, so I tend to mess up a lot of words too. So you'll be in great company here. But it was quite funny. We did our first. I'm based in Montreal, Canada. We're starting to see the taco thing coming here, which I'm very happy. Burgers, pizzas have been a mainstay, but I was in NYC last week in New York City for the first time. Obviously, they just reopened up the borders for Canadians to go down, and I think within 2 blocks on the Upper West Side, I saw about 12 taquerias. So I was like, okay, so tacos are taking over even in the North Side. So Are you more Netflix or YouTube?
Ooh. I'm getting more YouTube, I think, quite honestly.
Rabbit holes,
I subscribe to both, but I like the way in which YouTube gives me the kind of stuff that it thinks I should watch, and Netflix is becoming a little bit too broad based on my liking.
I would say I'm more Netflix because I feel like it's more long form, and I feel like my ADD can take over too much in YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube, those rabbit holes when it comes to business and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes I'm like, okay, like I'm 6 deep into something. Maybe I can move on with my life.
It's like TikTok. You lose yourself in TikTok, right? You just suddenly an hour's gone by after I don't know how many TikTok videos.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I touched on Clubhouse a few months ago. Like I didn't delete it. I was going to say delete it's not true, but I haven't been on for it. But yeah, the first week or two I was on there, I was like, okay, I need to put this away. Are you more chips or ice cream?
Oh, ice cream for sure. I grew up in Wisconsin. No question.
Nice.
What type of chips are you referring to?
You mean, you're thinking fries. I was thinking more potato chips, but yeah.
Ah, right. And that's because you're asking an Englishman, and obviously an Englishman would choose his chips, but he would choose his ice cream over his crisps, is what we would call them. So
crisps, yes. Okay, cool. Beach or mountain?
Beach.
That's a tough one for me. I grew up mountain, but I've converted to beach here on the West Coast, I think.
They're hard questions, right? I mean, they're both amazing things.
I know. These are very philosophical.
Yeah. And the last one, tea or coffee?
Tea. I'm an Englishman.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, kind of question. What kind of question to ask an Englishman, right?
Yeah, the Queen would have my head if I said anything other.
For sure. And it makes me think of Sting right away, and quite the famous song there. Thank you so much for playing my little this or that. Now, obviously, we came here to talk about you, the book, and the restaurant industry and where it's headed, and that comes to delivery and getting the food out of the four walls. Before we dig into obviously the subject of the book, I'm curious to know just a little bit about your backgrounds. Obviously, I read your bios, but for those of you who've never maybe heard of you, can you tell us just a little bit of what brought you to where we're at today?
Yeah, sure. So I came to the restaurant industry through Taco Bell, where I was the chief development officer and built a whole bunch of Taco Bells. About halfway through the journey of building about 1,000 Taco Bells, I realized that the omnichannel disruption was starting to affect our restaurants, starting to affect them in how the footprint was designed, in how the sales were getting to the consumer. And my head of architecture and I looked at each other and said, gosh, wouldn't it be great if there were a commissary we could go into in New York City and just deliver tacos, because that's how everyone's getting them anyway. And of course, ghost kitchens didn't exist at the time. And fast forward a few years, I met this man, Atul Sood, who's at Kitchen United, and he walked me into their very first location, which was not open at the time. And I thought, oh my goodness, they're making the thing that I, as the customer, want, which is pretty cool and doesn't happen very often in a career. And so I went over and joined them as employee number 4 before that first site was even open. Help them figure out what the business model was going to be and raise the initial capital and all of that good stuff. And along that journey, I met Carl.
Yeah, and so my background, Chris, was largely in the C-store space. I spent 18 years with BP, and that culminated in me running a 1,000-unit chain here on the West Coast called ampm. And it was when I came over to the US for my second time in 2015 that I really just saw the changing landscape of how the American consumer is interacting with food, and their expectations are rising, not only in terms of freshness, but in terms of variety. And of course, this was starting to appear for quite a while, but it was really coming to the fore in a C-store setting. And so when I left ampm, I really wanted to keep into that space and be part of something disruptive. And a mutual friend of Meredith and ours introduced us, and they told me about this thing called ghost kitchens. And I was like, what the heck's a ghost kitchen? No one had told me about it before. It sounded kind of interesting to learn about. And so Meredith shared with me her kind of story of leaving another big blue chip company and going to work at a startup. And it really was from there that our kind of time with working together and our friendship kind of blossomed. And it really was during my time of running operations and customer success and working with not just independents, but some of the larger restaurant chains out there, that I think all of us in that space were seeing the challenges that restaurants were facing. And the challenges, not just in terms of being in a ghost kitchen setup, but just how to thrive in a digital setting, how to actually connect with their consumers in a digital setting. And Meredith and I were driving back from our head office in Pasadena one day. And I said to her, it would be really good if we could just give these guys a book that tells it from a very independent perspective. And of course, there wasn't a book out there. But a number of months later, Meredith and I said, maybe we should write that book. And so the tale continues from that point.
Amazing. Well, glad that you did. I think it's quickly becoming a resource for so many people to kind of demystify, kind of understand, kind of dig in. I'm in the industry. I've spent 30 years in the restaurant industry. I've been in the tech world, serving restaurants for 2 years now. As we founded Piecemeal, and we're growing, and we're working with over 1,000 restaurants already. I found myself, even though I understand this world, learning quite a bit as I was digging through the book. And I told you even before we came on, I came up on some, I guess ideas that are kind of set around and that you challenge in the book, and especially about profitability with third parties and stuff like that. Like, okay, I need to reread this after the interview, and I'm curious to pick your brains. So thank you for taking the time to write it. I think it's a very important piece of literature right now for our industry. So I'm glad that you did. You kind of answered my next question, which was kind of, obviously what triggered writing the book. Just briefly, because we talk to people, like our audience is mainly independent restaurant operators. Piecemeal serves large chains, but we serve over, close, if not over 1,000 independent restaurants. So the people that are watching this may not necessarily understand, even though we hear it every day now, but what is a ghost kitchen? Without going too deep into it, because we will dig deeper in different models. But what does that mean? What does it mean for the person who's never heard it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would define a ghost kitchen as one that's been optimized for off-premise, has little to no on-premise in the concept. And because it's been optimized for off-premise, probably also has either multiple brands or multiple actual restaurants inside of it. In that way, is a much more efficient way of reaching the consumer. Tends to reduce occupancy costs, labor costs, utility costs, things like that, so that the consumer spend can be focused on the thing the consumer cares most about, which is great food conveniently offered.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I'm curious. I worked I was in my younger days, a multi-unit manager for McDonald's. So obviously the drive-through is a big part of that business. And as I was reading the book, in chapter 3, you say delivery is the new drive-through. Why is that?
Yeah, we touched on that largely to try and help represent the seismic change that's happening in our industry relative to what drive-through was. And we talked about the pace as well in that chapter, if you recall, Chris. And the idea of that was to say, look, these things need to be appropriately integrated into your business in a way that isn't situated on the side of your business. Delivery and takeout has been around for years and years, and the DoorDashes, the Grubhubs have been around for quite a while too, of course. And when you think about it from the standpoint of why now and why this book is relevant now, well, now we're trying to say, look, if restaurants treat off-premise food as a side latch onto their business model, it's unlikely to succeed for them. And actually, that was the same case with drive-through. It was only until the McDonald's of this world and others started integrating drive-through into their entire operation in terms of everything from the make line through to the way in which customers orientated themselves to the experience, that it really became a really important part of their overall business. And so we set the foundations in our book to be able to say, treat it like drive-through was, and actually it could be even more powerful than what drive-through was for the industry.
I think that's right. I think from the restaurant perspective, no question, we've got to embrace off-premise and understand how it changes the business model, but also for the consumer. That's the other aspect of that chapter. The reason consumers fell in love with drive-through was because it was so convenient. It was so easy, and it was such a great way to quickly get very consistent quality of food. And now delivery is an even more convenient convenience, right? That food comes to you. And so as much as baby boomers loved drive-through, now millennials and Gen Y love delivery.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having lunch with the CEO of probably one of, if not the largest company in Canada. They operate 8,000 restaurants in North America, and he was telling me how he's approaching it with, for his, I think they have 80 brands or something like that, and he's like, he's talking about his kids. At night they're not even thinking about what I want to eat. They go into the app, whatever it is, and then they're like, can they see something that kind of triggers them, and then that's what I'm going to order.
Yeah, they're so different. And I think for those of us who are Gen X and older, like myself, it's really good to talk to the younger generations and understand how they view this food, because it is so different from how you or I or anyone older than us would choose to interact with a restaurant. And we're learning, certainly over the last 18 months with the pandemic, we're learning and we're adopting these new technologies. But they just connect with them instantaneously.
Yeah, and I love both your answer, and you're taking me in 4 different directions I want to go to. So my, a cat focus, lack of focus from being from the restaurant industry. I'm going to try to keep myself to follow my game plan here, because a lot of really interesting things in there. You talked about quality. I wasn't going to go there, but so you said, the drive-through helped me have consistent quality. One thing I'm concerned about, having been in the industry for 30 years now, working for chains, working for independents and all that, drive-through was amazing and is still amazing when it's well done, right? Mm-hmm. When I don't get to the next corner and something's missing in my bag, or the food is cold, or the fries are soggy. Obviously, there is a gold rush, and I really want to get into that, of pivoting, delivery, ghost kitchens, whatever it is, right now. And some of it's really good, some of it's really bad. The famous ton of 2-star reviews versus other stuff. I've had I personally have had good experiences, even though I don't order a ton through third party. I even tried it I tried Uber Eats because they were in Montreal first, and I tried DoorDash last week, and was, obviously they subsidized my meal quite a bit, so it made it easy for me to try, but I was quite amazed of the quality, to be honest. But how do you see that as people scale really fast? Like, there's definitely a gold rush right now. Traditional brands are pivoting. People are putting a ton of money in ghost kitchens. Like, obviously, the key to successful drive-through, when that came about, was being able to offer quality. Right now, we see a little bit of both. How are you seeing it? Like, some people seem to say that there's more bad than good. I'm trying to be positive and be a glass half full kind of guy, but that's going to be key as well. And my question is, a lot of people are throwing themselves into this without necessarily the experience of providing quality.
Sure.
And how are we dealing with that?
The question's a really good one. I think the technology has got us to a really powerful place to be able to provide the convenience that Meredith was just talking about. But at times, we need to be mindful of how Restaurant 101 can be forgotten, and how good operations and everything about creating a fantastic dish for someone to enjoy is still absolutely central to creating a good experience, no matter where your guest is. And so, I think it is probably one of the biggest challenges. And it's also one of the least talked about challenges, quite honestly. We've been at all of the biggest conferences over here in the US over the last 6 months, and it's very rare that anyone talks about Restaurant 101 and good operating practices. So part of that challenge is because it is still being treated as an attachment to the current business. And that means it's getting secondary attention, if you will. And we touch on that in numerous different guises throughout the book, whether it be in terms of the operations chapter or in the drivers chapter, and the way drivers are interrupting the on-premise guest sitting and things like that. All of these things are ways in which are disrupting the ability to operate a smooth process for the completion of a brilliant dish. And that goes all the way through from the point at which food is brought in as ingredients into the restaurant, all the way through to the post-customer experience, and how restaurants can think about their operation to enhance it, to at least match the on-premise experience. And part of it, much like with drive-through, is actually integrating it into your entire business. There are concepts out there that don't have any on-premise business, virtual brands. And those concepts are developing their operation to create a great experience because they don't have the distractions of on-premise. It's the issue for me is when you're actually still getting off-premise orders without that distraction, still creating inferior food. Now that comes back to then the challenges around profitability. How much of this process is being disrupted because of the costs that are not being able to be put into creating a better experience, namely something like packaging, for example. The packaging, not only in terms of keeping the food at the right temperature, but the integrity of the food as it is in transit. Is it in the right kind of way to be able to transition from kitchen to a guest a couple of miles away? And, you know, Meredith and I purposely included the pizza chapter to be able to represent that piece of it. You know, it's not just drive-through, it's also pizzas had to go through this journey as well. And now when you think about a pizza transaction, whether you're eating a pizza as a dining occasion or whether you're having it delivered to your home, it's of an equivalent quality. Why is that? Because they've thought of every part of the process and how to improve things all the way through from the cooking process, through to the packaging, through to the way in which it's delivered in a thermal bag to the customer.
Very good. You're taking my brain again in 20 different directions. Meredith, did you want to add to that? No. You touched on the third parties. My concern too is, again, there's a gold rush. It's the new thing. It's definitely the future. Everybody wants to, obviously, COVID and what happened activated a lot of that. Third parties are not necessarily profitable from what we see, right? They're backed by a ton of VC money, and they subsidize a lot of transactions to create the habit. I think that's how you mentioned in the book. You know, DoorDash said, you know, we'll pay money because we just want to create the habit, and eventually people are, and as we were talking to the younger generation going in there. But I'm wondering if the unit economics are ever going to make sense for third party, and because it brings in an influx of I'm wondering how much it hurts. And I'm guessing, again, it's there. The sales are going up. Like, I'm just worrying probably about, it's the old consultant and operator in me that's worried about, you know, seeing a lot of people trying to do stuff they've never done and do it kind of poorly, especially like you said, restaurant 101, right? Not that many restaurants or that most restaurants are perfectly managed anyways. I mean, it's an industry that's really late on adopting tech. Obviously, the delivery and getting the food out has helped them accelerate that. But there's too many things in my brain right now. You both have melted my brain. I usually have a gift of gab and I can't stop, but right now I'm just trying to see if it's being subsidized by third parties for people to order. How do independent restaurants that want to get in the game, how do they stay competitive? Obviously there's not the fees that are there, but there's still fees related to them being able to do that. So I'm just not quite sure how the
economics of the whole thing works.
Yeah, long term.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the economics of the third-party delivery companies, because I think it is very, very commonly said, like it is the commonly held wisdom that if the VC money dries up and they stop subsidizing this, then the consumer will stop doing it. And in fact, there was a Bloomberg article a couple of years ago talking about the VC subsidizing the millennial lifestyle, like everything they do. Yeah. And you know, I think that is both true and not true. VC money is certainly subsidizing adoption of that lifestyle. But if you read DoorDash's S1, which was their filing for their IPO, they talk about the different cohorts of consumers who are on their platform. And those who've been on there for a long time are very profitable to them. And what that's telling you is at the very beginning of getting a new consumer, there's a huge customer acquisition cost associated to getting them to download the app, use the app, build a habit on the app. But then once they're there and they're using it as a regular part of their life, they become very profitable. So what that tells me in the case of DoorDash is after they've gone through this big adoption push, they're going to get to a point where they're quite profitable. Uber Eats is a little hard to tell because they're a subsidiary inside of a private company. But I'm guessing it's very, very similar to what's going on with DoorDash. And then Grubhub, also fascinating because they have many markets in which they are very profitable. And that is being offset by markets in which they are less profitable. That tends to have to do with their local market share in those markets, tends to have to do with the density of those markets, things like that. So as they figure out where it makes sense for them to operate, I think you're going to see them be quite profitable as well. There's another delivery company, Eat Street, privately held, which focuses on small towns in the Midwest. They are profitable. So I think that tells you this can be done profitably. And the ultimate clue that this can be done profitably, pizza. Domino's has been delivering pizza for many years and is a fantastically profitable company. So I know that the delivery companies can make it work. Now, that brings us to the restaurants, because I think what most independent restaurants and maybe even some chains would say is, great, so they're making all the money and we're doing all the work. Like, this sucks. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true for a couple of reasons. First is, even if you're paying 30%, which is the top percentage that delivery companies charge, they now have multiple tiers, 30, 25, and 15 for different uses. If you're a large chain, you're probably negotiating them down because you're using them differently. White label costs less than the branded version, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you're paying that 30%, assuming that those orders are incremental, then you're going to be making more money. And I think that's what, chapter 7, the one that we've all had to reread several times, is all about. It's about saying to a restaurant operator who in conventional wisdom is saying, oh, it's a 30-30-30-10 model, right? 30% to food and paper, 30% to labor, 30% to other, occupancy, overhead, marketing, whatever it is, and then 10% of profit. They look at that breakdown and they go, well, if I'm making 10% profit and DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub is over there taking 30%, I'm therefore making -20. So every time I'm sending out an order, I'm actually losing money, right? That's kind of the logic. But if you instead say, wait a minute, those are incremental orders, and therefore I don't have to pay for marketing. I don't have to pay for occupancy. I don't need to hire another manager. I may not even need another line cook, depending on how much volume I'm getting. I don't need more utilities, all that stuff. Well, you have a lot more money to play with. And all of a sudden, that 30% in the context of leveraging your fixed costs in your restaurant makes a lot more sense. Now, that all comes down to this argument of incrementality. And are these orders truly incremental or not? And I think, different restaurants have different experiences. Certainly where delivery penetration is higher, places like New York City, I think they would say, the incrementality argument works up to a point and then starts to break down. But if we reflect on our own behavior as consumers, I don't look at my husband and say, hey, do you want to go to the restaurant down the street tonight, or do you want to order from the restaurant down the street tonight? That is never a conversation that we have, right? We say, do you want to cook or do you want to order in? Do you want to go pick up food, or do you want to have it brought to us, right? Like, when we think about going out, we think about that as an experience, and that's something we're going to do. We're not going to replace it with some kind of in-home cooking. And that is true for most consumers. And in fact, we have a statistic in the book where this is now probably 5 years out of date, but millennials use grocery stores at the rate of $1,000 less a year than someone their same age 10 years ago would have done. And what that tells you is that people are shifting out of grocery and into restaurant, and importantly, into restaurant off premise. You also see this in the fact that in 2014, food away from home, which is a fancy way for saying restaurant by the US government, has exceeded food at home, which is a fancy way for saying grocery, for the first time in history. And that's only continued to accelerate until COVID kind of created a weird little bump. But I think we will continue to see consumers wanting more and more and more prepared foods coming from restaurants, whether that's in restaurant, picked up, or brought to them.
That's really interesting. You just made me realize something. I keep hearing and seeing for years that, grocery stores were stealing away sales from restaurants because they do a lot of the, ready to go meals, prepared food, all that. And listening to you, I'm like, so is delivery and what's happening now the way for restaurants to go and steal some of that back is like, no, we'll take it to their door, which you're not doing. I mean, obviously there's a lot of grocery companies right now. I'm seeing a lot of concepts in the US. Obviously Instacart's huge, but I saw Go something last week, anyways, in New York, but there's a lot of them happening as well. But I'm like, yeah, maybe that's the way for them to compete and pick a fight on that side, right?
Yeah. And I don't know Canada as well and the data there and the situation there, but actually expect it's a little bit more like the UK and your experience there, Carl.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the way in which the US market is evolving is very much in response to grocery not having evolved fast enough either. The grocery experience for me as a Brit relative to someone that lives here in the US now is very, very different. You know, I was having groceries delivered to my house, choosing a particular 30-minute window back in 2005 in the UK. And that's only starting to come about as a result of COVID accelerating things right now over here in the US. And so the American consumer, I suspect the Canadian consumer in their own right, are starting to see a blurring of these various different channels come together. And I think whether it's grocery, whether it's restaurants, whether it's something in between with like these home delivery kits, all of these things are trying to address the central facet and need of a customer mindset. And that is, I don't have enough time. And how do I get what I want in the best way possible to help me get through my day? And that's where, in many ways, the delivery concept is something which is helping people address that lack of time. It's not replacing date night on a Friday night.
Yeah, that's really good. But one more point for restaurants is I'm thinking, yeah, obviously there's been grocery, you could order your groceries online here for years, and it got crazy accelerated, obviously, during COVID. It was crazy to see about 20, 30 people in my local grocery store, like literally walking around with a pad, no tech, preparing orders, and then have all these carts at one cash lined up. Like, I'm like, oh my God, there is no technology behind this. It's like it drove me insane. But you're talking about that, and it's funny. I have here the HelloFresh with the other rebate. Talking about another subsidized industry, but this you need to plan 2 weeks in advance where you're going to eat Wednesday a few weeks from now, which for a lot of people is not very exciting. And then groceries, you still need to plan it before you order it, even though there's a window. But I think this is another place where restaurants will win, is obviously the selection is amazing, and I can decide now what I want to have in 30 minutes, right? Which is definitely a head start on. I mean,
sure, and the price point isn't great either, Chris. That's the other thing. A lot of these pre-prepared meals that can be cooked in the microwave for a few minutes, they're still not great prices right now. Yeah. And so you're doing that value orientation in your own mind to say, is it worth me getting something out of a plastic container and stick it in the microwave, or getting it freshly delivered to me from a restaurant? Yeah. So there's a value equation in that.
For sure. I said before, definitely a gold rush for either brands moving to ghost kitchens or virtual brands, or and I'm seeing, like, here was late, and Canada was late compared to the US, but now I'm seeing a different acceleration in the last 6 months. Traditional brands, I'm seeing hotels now going into having a ghost kitchen because they have the staff there. The hotel may not be that busy, might as well have some virtual brands on third party and stuff like that, or on delivery. It seems to me like any gold rush that the market's getting very overcrowded. Again, a lot of people seeing the opportunity. There's some seasoned brands and operators and entrepreneurs that are going in there. There's also a lot of people that are smelling the opportunity and trying to go there. How are you seeing it? Am I crazy to think the market's getting overcrowded? I know the sales predictions I'm seeing, and I'm probably not even up to date, but we're talking about, I'm not even going to quote a number. You probably have some of how much delivery sales are going to go up in the next 5 years. But I'm just seeing a lot of people throwing a lot of money at opening a lot of concepts, and it seems that it's getting a little crowded.
Yeah, well, I'll take the two ideas separately: ghost kitchen versus virtual brands. First of all, we defined ghost kitchens already. A virtual brand, I would say, is the software. Right. So if ghost kitchens are the hardware, that's where you're making the product, that's the infrastructure. The virtual brands are the software that are riding over the top. And virtual brands can go into a ghost kitchen. They can go into a host kitchen, which would be an existing restaurant somewhere. They don't necessarily live on their own as a full brick and mortar expression as we traditionally would have seen. So let's take ghost kitchens first. We are in the infancy of that market. So yes, a lot of money's been poured into them. Yes, a lot of them are being built. There's big announcements coming out all the time about deals people are making, and whether it be Kitchen United with Kroger or Reef with Wendy's or whatever, you see these big announcements. It's very exciting. It sounds like they're everywhere, but they're really very early days, and they're just starting to roll these out. And I would say the ghost kitchen market is probably still less than 1% of total restaurant sales, right? So we have a long way to go. And I'm very bullish on it becoming a lot more over time, because they are so much more efficient. You know, we already talked about all the labor savings, occupancy savings, utility savings. There's just no way that something that is that much more efficient is not going to, in the long term, win. Now, how long does it take us to get there? How quickly do we, replace existing kitchen infrastructure with ghost kitchen infrastructure? That's a longer conversation. And then virtual brands, I think you could say, goodness, this last year has been crazy. And I would say that because when we wrote the chapter on virtual brands, we thought, this will happen 3 to 5 years from now. And instead, the pandemic occurred, and the example brands we talked about, yes, they're still there, they're still operating, they're doing a great job. But in the meantime, all these other things popped up. And really surprising to me was really big mainstream companies started having virtual brands. So something like Chili's with its Just Wings was mind-blowing to me, because that is the definition of mainstream. It's no longer these little innovative upstarts doing it. It's a big established brand doing it. And you might ask, well, how many more of these virtual brands could there be? And I think there could be a ton, is the answer. Because the consumer has changed so much. They've changed so much in what they want to eat, how they want to eat, where they want to eat. And it is hard for the big established brands to change as quickly as the consumers changed. And it is hard for a new brand who's going after that opportunity to roll out in the old brick and mortar way, right? If you're going to go get yourself 10,000 restaurants, you need billions of dollars if you're going to roll out the old brick and mortar way, right? It's going to take forever and a ton of money. But if you can just say, wow, I've created this new menu, this new brand, and I'm going to roll it out over the existing infrastructure that's already there, that's pretty cool. And consumers, because they've changed so much, are going to respond to that.
Yeah, we had a conference only last week, and Robert Earl, who's behind Virtual Dining Concepts, thinks virtual brands are going to be 10x what they are today, Chris. And so I think there's going to be a huge level of growth opportunity, but it comes back to what we were chatting about before, and that is how a restaurant's going to manipulate their operation to be able to utilize that capacity that they have. The phrase I often use is that we're moving from a time where the capacity of a restaurant was constrained by the amount of tables and the turn type in those restaurants, where now, because you've got that ability to deliver to people within 15 minutes radius of you, you've got access to thousands, maybe millions in certain places. And so therefore, how many dishes can you churn out of your kitchen? And what processes and equipment do you need to have in that kitchen to be able to maximize that? And when you have that in place, then not only can you deliver your core brand from your restaurant, but actually you can deliver these additional brands on top. And we feature a few of them in the book. One of them, Wow Bao, for example, uses 4 square feet worth of space. And from that can generate another $7,000-8,000 worth of sales each week. So that is incremental. It's not going to change everything, but that is really quite important for a lot of independent restaurants that are trying to get in on this game.
Yeah, that's really another very interesting point. One of the large brands we're working with, I was with them as they were launching their virtual brand. So it's a chicken restaurant, famous chain all over Quebec, over 30 stores. And they were turning out of the same kitchen a chicken virtual brand that was doing a bit of a different product. But I just thought it was fascinating that they weren't necessarily pushing their personal sales. They were literally saying, hey, there's an opportunity there. We're already cooking chicken. We might as well kind of rebrand this. And you wouldn't know, the way they brought it, which is the case with many people, I don't think anybody knew on the third-party app that this was, the company behind it. So I thought it was quite fascinating that
I think it's a great example. We feature a company called Doghouse in the book. And just by the very name of Doghouse, you think, well, hot dogs, right? But they have an item on their menu called a plant-based burger. So if you're a customer and you want to eat a plant-based burger, does your mind go to Doghouse? Probably not. So what did they do? They created a virtual brand called Plant B, which therefore enabled people that were searching for plant-based burgers to find them. But for the actual restaurant and the operation, there was hardly any change to their operation because they were already creating that item. So that's a great nimble way of being able to think about virtual brands and adjusting your operation to accommodate what customers are looking for and thinking like an SEO expert.
Very interesting. We talked about virtual brands. Obviously, I just mentioned one in an existing kitchen, the example you gave with Doghouse. You mentioned 4 models in the book: kitchen as a service, forward logistics points, virtual brands in existing kitchens, and virtually integrated virtual restaurants. Can you just kind of clear that out for us and kind of briefly give us a definition of what they are, just so people see that there's different ways of going about this?
Yeah, sure. I might have to open my book so that I can remind myself of all those. But let's start with the kitchen as a service one, because that is, I think, the easiest one to understand.
Yeah.
That's the one that we probably hear the most about between places like Kitchen United and Cloud Kitchens. It's really that kitchen infrastructure that's been fully built out, but with a tech layer on top of it. So it's a true prop tech innovation where they're creating a capital light way to roll out by having that kitchen infrastructure built out, but then they're layering technology on top of it to help deal with the various different off-premise order channels, to help deal with the creation of virtual brands, and in many ways to help actually operate the facility in a much more tech-enabled and optimized way. And the reason we call it kitchen as a service is because it's like software as a service, right? You pay a little bit every month in order to get access to all of these great things, fully built out kitchen and a suite of technology. Instead of paying one large upfront fee, which is, the CapEx it takes to build a brick and mortar restaurant, you're sort of paying as you go. So we'll start there. Yeah. What's the next one? Remind me.
Forward logistic points, which I guess was talking about usually if you can deliver within 15 minutes of your store, now there's a way for you to go deeper into that territory and deliver to a wider audience.
That's exactly right. So this one is really interesting. The best example of this is All Day Kitchens. They're an Andreessen Horowitz-backed ghost kitchen, and they are much more attuned, I would say, to the small independent that has just one location and is super popular, has an incredibly strong brand. Historically, people have driven to go to that place, but they can't order it for delivery because it's just too far away from their home. And what All Day Kitchens does, together with their culinary team, is create a version of those most popular dishes that they can then execute through this network of forward logistics points and then get closer to the consumer in that way. So if you had one store in, Mountain View, California, which is in the Bay Area, now all of a sudden, taking advantage of that whole network, you can deliver throughout the Bay Area.
Very interesting. That I learned something today on that one. I didn't realize that was being done. Virtual brands in existing kitchens, we mentioned before. I'm doing something specific, and then I roll out either the same or a different product out of the same kitchen that I rebrand. And you're like Carl, you're mentioning a plant-based and a hot dog plate in a hot dog. Let's do a plant-based concept. And the last one is virtually integrated virtual restaurants, which are we talking here about?
The vertically integrated virtual restaurant. So a good example here is someone who does everything from soup to nuts. They've got the technology for the order point. They are producing the food. They own the brands. They've got the delivery. A great example of this one is Cluster Truck. And they are in kind of the Indiana area of the United States. And they literally totally vertically integrated every single thing they're doing. And in a lot of ways, it's a bit more like the pizza model, right? So you think of Domino's having their own ordering interface. They own the brand. They execute the food, I guess, through franchisees, but they still execute the food. And then they've got employed drivers that are their own fleet, their own network that they're managing to get the food out there. Now, Cluster Truck, which maybe you can tell by the name, has many different brands that they own and that they're executing in that kitchen. And one of the neat things about this, as well as the Doghouse example that Carl gave, is that when you're creating multiple brands kind of from scratch, you can say, how am I going to make all these things work together in the kitchen so they're not interrupting each other? It's much, much harder, I think, to take two brands and smush them together into a kitchen than it is to, start from first principles and say, how do we have shared ingredients? How do we have shared processes? How do we not have these brands get in the way of each other?
Very good.
And just back to that third category for a moment, Chris, because you mentioned that, and I think C3 is the company we referenced in that particular part of the chapter. But they are also linked to the Accor Hotel Group through SBE. And one of the interesting things about that is, think if you're a hotel owner right now and you're thinking about your guests that are wanting to have food delivered. Are they going to go to the room service menu, pay overpriced items and get that delivered to your room? Or are you going to go onto an Uber Eats or a DoorDash and have your food delivered? So I think hotel owners are looking at that saying, we've got this great kitchen infrastructure here. Why on earth aren't we creating items that, yes, can service the customers that are staying with us in our hotel, but also for those people that are around us too? So I think that's where that particular one comes through particularly nicely.
Very interesting. And just to clarify, because I was going to ask you about kitchen as a service, and now I'm starting to realize I think kitchen as a service and the integrated virtual brands might be what I was mixing up. And I was going to ask you actually, what do you think, or what do you think is kind of the percentage of, basically, I have a building, I have 6 kitchens that I rent out, which is what you were explaining before, kitchen as a service. I give you the infrastructure, the website, the tech, and all that. And then as an operator, I get to not have a ton of upfront cost to operate that. Versus, are we seeing brands, and that's what I'm understanding, is that fourth category where I'm got the whole building with maybe 6 kitchens or 3 kitchens, out of which we roll out, whether it's 5, 10, 15 brands, but I'm the operator of the entire thing. I'm guessing the model is more kitchen as a service than the other one is probably more out there and more popular.
I think in the US, a lot more money has been put into the kitchen as a service portion. But in Canada, it feels like, because of ghost kitchen brands with Walmart, that it's a little more the opposite. I'm curious what your perspective is, since you're actually there.
Yep. I know they're on fire, is what I see, even in the US and everywhere. And I saw that they're even helping some brands that haven't been doing really well kind of roll out, multiple locations. But it's I guess they're the big player here that we're seeing doing it in that fashion, where they go and I guess they license, I'm guessing, the more known brands, and they operate that instead of creating virtual brands. I'm curious to know, to me, all of that, whether it's, in tech and restaurants, in any industry, it's all about execution, right? So I'm seeing a lot of people doing a lot, like you're mentioning C3. I think C3 was with Reef, where they had announced 500 restaurants. And now I saw this week, they're like, yeah, we're not doing 500, we're doing 800. And that's where I go back to is the market overcrowded? And you've convinced me that it's obviously very early.
Early days.
I mean, the other side of this, Chris, is that virtual brands give restaurant owners a chance to experiment in a much cheaper fashion than before, right? So a lot of these brands that are being started and tried in different ways, they're test kitchens as well, in a way. So you'd have some of the larger restaurant companies that would speak to us from a ghost kitchen standpoint would say, yeah, we want to use a ghost kitchen as an innovation center to test these concepts, because it's a lot easier to be able to test concepts in a virtual brand or in a ghost kitchen setting than it is to be able to deploy that into a current smooth running machine. And so, it's not that each one of these concepts is going to work. It's also about being able to find out what the customers in each locality want. And so you're not going to necessarily always find the Chili's with the It's Just Wings being across every single network, because you might find that in certain localities, Chili's might develop a virtual brand that fits better for the demography in a particular unit's location. So it's about understanding the customer base, understanding the different kind of tastes and the niche requirements that they have, and being able to service them, and using data to really help them do that.
Amazing. The operators that thinks that, actually, forget that. Let me scratch that. Do you have any tips for independent restaurants that are either not sure where to start? Obviously, buy the book. That'll be a great place to give you some ideas. But any 2-3 tips you would say, like, you're gonna miss the boat, right? This is not a fad. This is happening everywhere. There's the famous adapt or die in many cases, and it's probably going to happen here. But any 2-3 tips you would give an independent restaurant that's watching this and say, okay, where do I start? What do I need to do?
Sure, I'll start. And I suspect Meredith will add the toppings and the sauce. So the way I would start is obviously start, right? Start and don't recognize you have to do it all overnight. So that's one of the big questions we get asked a lot is, should I be on just one marketplace, the one that gets me an exclusive, therefore discounted rate? Our recommendation, more often than not, is to try and be on as many as possible. if you position the marketplaces as your tool of being able to acquire new customers and buy into the incrementality that we touch on in the book, then the trick from that point is then being able to understand, okay, if you've acquired that customer, how can you put them through your own channel? So that way you don't have to pay the 30% fee each and every time, but actually bring them through and actually be part of your experience. So they have a great experience and then come through your first party channel for the second, third, fourth, and ongoing transactions. So that sounds all well and good, but how do you do that? How do you actually get a customer who's ordered through an Uber Eats to think about, well, maybe next time I should actually order through this restaurant's own website or through their own app? And the way in which we often encourage restaurants to think about that is through packaging, or maybe branded packaging, or the inclusions as to what you have within the food package as it arrives. And so thinking about the unboxing experience and the promotions that you share with your customers is really critical. I would almost go to the length of saying, is it worth you giving a loss lead-in promotion to acquire the customer through your own first-party platform? Give them something so lucrative that actually encourages them to try you again through their own platform. McDonald's have recently launched their own app and their own loyalty program, and they're offering customers that download their app, at least here in California, a free large fries. And so only the other day, I went onto the app and downloaded that, and then for my second visit, I went back and thought, oh, I got that free large fries. And now I'm more into the experience. Now I'm gaining loyalty points. And so that starts the digital dialogue. Once you've started to get the customer information, you can then evolve your restaurant to the next level. And that's using that data about your customer to better understand more about them, to better give them the offers that most suit their needs, and to be able to start a digital dialogue as if you are the best server that's serving a table in a restaurant. So that would be the starting steps.
Amazing. I'm glad you went there, because that's usually what I tell people. And now the operator in me is like, get on as many as you can. And when they open it up, you have to have ordering on your website. But obviously, they may take and own your customer, the third parties, but you can do it the other way around. Is that if they bring you people and you can bring them back through, and I love the way you said it, like I've always said, at least throw your menu in there and say, hey, order on our website next time, and let's build a relationship together. And then you want to bring loyalty, or you want to bring, like you said, some kind of an offer to do it. But if you can make, instead of the third parties owning your old customers or your old guests, you flip it around on them, and whoever they bring your way, you try to bring back to your business, and you'll still, that you were talking about incremental orders before, Meredith. That makes so much more sense to me, because I am getting incremental, but I am actually doing something to try and bring them back to me, right? They'll do their thing to try to bring them to me, because it always amazes me where if I'm Googling my restaurant and then DoorDash pops up, is like they're literally going and stealing somebody that was looking for me already, right? So, but have the infrastructure and use both systems to your advantage. I think that's an amazing tip.
Let me just pick up on one thing you just mentioned, which was throw your menu on there. And I think that what I would say with that, Chris, is that it's really important that what you serve your customers with from an off-premise setting is situated best for off-premise purposes. Correct. So what do I mean about that? Your dishes shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to create. If they are, and you're telling the third parties to do that, they're going to add probably 20 minutes delivery time on top of that. So if it's taken more than 30 minutes to get a dish to a customer, it's going to not be in the right carousel. So therefore, straight away, you're going to miss a whole bunch of customers that want their food within 30 minutes or not. And also, start small. Again, if you can get great food photography on your best items that are going to service your customer best from an off-premise standpoint, that is going to help encourage you to be successful. And then you can build up from there.
Great advice.
I think I would only add to that, because I think Carl laid out a very good staircase. Start on third-party platforms, move to first party, and then figure out how you're going to use the data. The only thing I would add to that is to recognize that the third parties are always going to play a role. It's not like you're going to, at some point, convince everybody in the world that they should order first party and not be on the third parties, right? So even McDonald's today, when they came out with the news that they've made partnerships with both DoorDash and Uber Eats for white label delivery, they have a huge amount of sales going through their first party app, as Carl just talked about. They're investing a lot in convincing consumers to use that app. Even they are still on the platforms. And why is that? Because there's some consumers that are going to be on the platforms. And if you want to service those consumers, that's where you need to be. And by definition, those consumers are incremental to you because they're a platform consumer, right? And so these are the people who, buy into the loyalty program and get free delivery. And, every time they order or think to order food, the first place they go is DoorDash or Uber Eats. That's just how they eat. And if you want to get those consumers, you need to always be on those platforms. And then you need to think about, well, how do I make those platforms work for me? How do I make that operationally viable, economically viable? Operationally, that probably comes down to having something like an order mark. I think Toast now also does this integrated into their system where they pull down all of the different third-party platforms and those orders directly into your POS, which is great. And then how do you make it work for you economically, making sure that those items are things that even with fees on them, you feel comfortable putting out the door, and that consumers are paying appropriately for the convenience that they're receiving from you. And most consumers, I think, understand that they're getting a huge benefit when something is delivered to them and that there's a cost to that. Just being careful as to where you put that fee, so that if someone's discovering your restaurant for the first time on one of these platforms, which is likely if you're an independent, they're not discovering you and looking at the three things they can compare very easily on the platforms, which are ratings, time, as Carl already alluded to, and price, and saying, ooh, gosh, that brand looks expensive, and then just never using you, right?
Very valuable tips. Thank you for that. I'm a big fan of. It's cool to talk about concepts, but sometimes it's fun to get some concrete stuff and some real things we can put into place. Time is flying by. I have 30 more questions I'd love to ask you, but I do want to play a little rapid fire with you because it was fun to hear about the both of you at the beginning. Best place to get the book would be?
Yeah, so if you'd like to support our first-party platform, you can go to deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com. Actually, if your listeners would like to use the coupon code TABLE21, they'll get a 21% discount on the book. We'll leave
my first coupon on the podcast.
Your first coupon, absolutely. But of course, it is available on the Amazons of this world. It's available as a Kindle. We're releasing an audiobook pretty soon as well, so you can get it through obviously anywhere which you'd typically get a book to.
And we'll get to hear both of you on the audiobook, or somebody else reading it?
Just me. Meredith have favored my accent, so apologies to people with my pronunciation of certain names.
Yeah, and for restaurants, obviously, you don't want people to order through third-party delivery and they order through you. Then don't order the book through Amazon. Go on the website and order it there.
That's right.
Love reviews on Amazon. I'd love good reviews on Amazon. Go there.
Yeah, exactly. Order it there and then go put a good review on Amazon. Thank you so much for the discussion. I mean, I could have done 3 hours with you. There's so many other things I'd like to touch on, but I do want to do a little rapid fire in the 3-4 minutes we have left. Quick question for a couple of quick questions for both of you. Best trip you've ever taken?
Best trip for me was Australia. 3 weeks, 1 week in Brisbane, Great Barrier Reef, 1 week in Sydney, which is very much like here in SoCal, another week in the Great Ocean Road down in Melbourne. Beautiful.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a trip I took with my husband and my son when he was just a baby to Hawaii. And I think it had less to do with Hawaii and more to do with just those two wonderful guys in my life. But it was great.
That sounds fun. 3 words that best describe you.
Wow. Okay. Let's go with fun, engaging, and humble.
Oh, you didn't choose woo, huh? You should have had us do 3 words to describe the other one.
I'm used to doing one-on-one interviews. That's actually really good.
Spent so much time together over the last year and a half writing this book. I think that'd be funny.
Yeah.
All right, my 3 words. I'm gonna go with introspective, strategic, and silly.
I love it.
Yeah.
That you can be. I sound a little bit of a dichotomy there, which is great. I love people that go on both sides.
Not really trying to keep with the rapid pace though as well.
No, but I'm very slow. I probably should have added slow as one of my words.
It's all good. That would be number 4, so you're good with the other 3. You're on a deserted island. You can only bring 1 album of music. one record of music, what would it be?
Oh wow. Probably a Coldplay.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Any one of the Coldplays.
You can bring the same album and
album. Yeah.
go there. Are we still opening in the next 5-10 years? Are we still opening brick and mortar restaurants?
You know, I think there's going to be a lot of conversions. I think there will be some new brick and mortar, but not nearly as many as there have been. Over the last 30 years, I would say we had the great retail build out as in particular America got ever more suburban. I think that is starting to slow down. We're starting to go up more. And so you're going to see a lot of repurposing of assets. You will still see brick and mortar openings, but fewer than before.
In California, they've just approved a law which is allowing people to cook dishes for people to have delivered from their home. So that the home kitchens are getting permitted, but it tells you that even that is something that's happening now as well.
It's crazy. If you could have dinner with anyone, who would that be?
You, Chris.
I was going to say, other than me.
Obviously.
Alive or dead? Are we going there?
Yeah.
Interesting. I would probably have Richard Branson.
That would be a great talk for sure.
I think I'll go with the Obamas. They're not one person, though. They're two people. I kind of cheated. I don't know.
I mean, both of them are really interesting people. So that would probably be a very, very nice dinner. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, I could play even this rapid fire game with you forever or talk about the book forever, but I appreciate your time, appreciate the book. For everybody, go check out deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com or check it out on Amazon if you want to be one of those people. Just kidding. It's available in many places where you find good books. Meredith, Carl, it was a pleasure to have you on. Wishing you a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.